Hi, my name is Valerie Bond, and this is my first episode for my podcast. So, my podcast is going to be called The Road to Resiliency. It's something that I've been kind of marinating on for like 5 to 10 years. I've wanted to write a book about my personal journey through marriage, divorce, child co sharing, co parenting, family trauma, and how I got through it. So that is how this podcast idea was born. The story behind why I decided to do a podcast actually started when I moved to Florida. So I moved to Florida in the summer of 2022 from Salt Lake City, and I packed up my things, said goodbye to all my friends and family that I knew and loved dearly, and moved across the country. I only knew about two people in Orlando area, and I ended up finding a home out by the beach, which is great. Who wouldn't love living near the beach? And I ended up moving near the Space Coast, Melbourne area. So when I moved here, I didn't know anybody in this close knit area. I remember being in my living room, unpacking boxes and furniture, and remember thinking, I'm actually pretty lonely. I don't know anybody here. And so, how was I going to pass the time as I got used to living in a new state, a new city, and a new area? I remembered that, podcasts were kind of becoming popular, and I'd listened to a few during COVID time. And, you know, um, I started just listening to podcasts. I found ones where the speakers and the hosts had pleasant voices, and they were funny and they were charming and they were easy to listen to, almost like a friend that I was going out to dinner with or meeting for coffee. So I had a few that I would just rotate and I would listen, and I would become excited every week to hear from the hosts. Then I decided it would actually be a good idea to turn my idea of the road to resiliency into a podcast so I could start telling my story and how I overcame a lot of personal struggles and family traumas that were really challenging to overcome. My idea was to write a book about my road to resiliency and my personal journey. But I'm starting with a podcast. So you got to start somewhere. I also, when I was in college, finishing up my bachelor's degree in 2013, I had to do a thesis paper. And at the time, I was working in child development at the U.S. Coast Guard base. I was working as a preschool teacher for early childhood, and I decided to do my thesis paper on military children and resiliency. And I talked a lot about programs like Head Start and different things that helped children go through really challenging times, because a lot of times the military children were they were moving around a lot. Mom or dad was gone for months at a time, sometimes a year. They didn't have the stability that, your normal two-parent household had. They went through a lot, but they were able to overcome. And I talked about different resources that would help them. So that kind of was the start of me learning about what that word meant, resiliency. Um, After a few things that happened in Northern California, I ended up moving to Salt Lake City, and I started my own journey of healing and working with a therapist on a lot of things that had happened to me in my 20s. And that was when I learned how I was, becoming resilient. Becoming resilient isn't something that just happens overnight. It happens day by day. And there's things that you can do to strengthen your resiliency and almost like activate it. And that's where this idea came from. I'll start by talking about my own personal journey and my road to resiliency, how that road started and became more concrete, and then what those steps were as I walked on that road to resiliency. And once I'm kind of done with that, then I'm going to interview friends and talk about their own personal road to resiliency and how they were walking along maybe the road they thought they were going to live and do, and life was just going to be great and everything was going to be normal. And then all of a sudden life wasn't normal. And that's where, your road splits and you're like, I can take one way or the other. And it's all about how you recognize that your life has gone off track and what are the steps that you take to continue on living and becoming resilient. Resiliency isn't perfect, it doesn't mean that all your problems go away and everything's just magically fixed and cured and you don't have to do anything. Resiliency is the actual work that it takes to get through the trauma, get through life, learn the steps of self-care, learn the steps that help you manage daily life after something traumatic happens. It's becoming stronger, almost like, lifting weights at the gym. You start out small, and as you gradually increase your strength, you're able to add more techniques and more weight so that you become stronger. It's so that you don't have as many times in your life where you do fall apart and everything just goes, to hell. And for me, it was learning a lot about why I felt the way I did, a lot about my childhood, piecing it together, a lot of things. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm hopeful that I can, gather all the information that I've learned over the years and kind of put it into a good format that's easy to understand and fun, because anybody that knows me knows I do like to have fun. I'm very carefree. So I guess that's it for episode 1. But I wanted to just kind of explain what the idea is around this podcast, where it came from, how I got here to Florida, why I decided to even do a podcast, and a little bit more just about my journey. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.